Hello, I'm Carolyn Holzman, and this is Confessions of an SEO. These weekly confessions run 15 to 20 minutes, give or take. Season 6 continues to be an exploration into the physics of AI models and specifically how they work to generate citations. More precisely, what do we need to do so that they do that? So welcome to episode 27 of Confessions Season 6. Today, it's going to be all about how to treat Google's crawl scheduler like the active power grid it is. This week, I'm going to be focused and mechanically precise. I'm talking about the silent treatment that sites get, specifically in terms of the aftermath of a penalty, an algorithmic penalty, and how to wake up that crawl scheduler that refuses to talk to you. If you've been following my live case study there's a test domain that was basically wiped out all the way down to its single index page, which was its homepage. I took this on, I installed VizzEx, and thinking that, hey, put your money where your mouth is. And I did not add new content. I did remove content. There was over 220 pages on it. And I isolated 34, and then I worked to apply all the VizzEx recommendations, content recommendations, connecting, linking in between pages based on not just topic, but connecting the logic, creating the logic path for the LLMs. And this whole process, it's been a learning for me really to discover how sensitive the crawling system is, in that they don't give any damaged site the benefit of the doubt. Like if you have a damaged site, you don't just have a low crawl budget, you have a zero crawl budget. And so finally, the planets miraculously aligned, and the content entered a strict 12-day hard freeze. Now, this is something that came out of my research. There is a window where the AI, and specifically in Google, is for Gemini, is monitoring your content. So you don't want to make any edits or updates or category tweaks. You want to keep everything super chill. And now in this case, it was June 16th, and everything was running fine. I knew it was on the clock. But after the clock was over, I'm like waiting. And interestingly enough, even though the internal gates were cleared and cleaned and very low computation would be required for Googlebot to come in and recrawl them, the crawl scheduler, the thing that tells Googlebot on its own, because we have Search Console, but that's us telling the bot, and it's a whole different crawler. But when you look at Google, they have their own internal scheduler, crawl scheduler, and it doesn't just return to normal crawling on its own. And especially after, a penalty like this, that's what I'm talking about, not giving it the benefit of the doubt. It is really, it doesn't just happen. I'll tell you what you have to do. Now, I do want to talk about something that, I think a lot of people think, well, I'm just going to start to send traffic. Now, y'all know I'm not going to say something unless I've watched it, and this is not heated up leftovers. So we really need to understand the mechanical reality of Google's crawl scheduler. There is a persistent theory in the SEO community that you can jumpstart a penalized site by throwing traffic at it. The premise is thinking if I do this somehow, some way, if Google sees traffic of any kind, Googlebot will come and crawl and index the rest of my pages. Turns out, in this age of answer engines, that belief is completely false. There's no basis for it. Google's crawl scheduler is now essentially a cost accounting system, and its purpose is to minimize how much money is spent on recrawling everybody's site at scale. That's why it gives no quarter if you have a zero crawl budget. Now, the system operates on queue crawl queue logic, and it evaluates the sitemap's last modified date. Now, last week we talked a lot about that, but essentially it looks at it and basically decides, runs, I'm not quite sure what the calculation is specifically, but it looks at the difference between the two, the cached and what the new one is, to decide, is this or is this not going to create some high gain information for us? Is it worth going in and crawling it? Now, this system is not hooked into Google Analytics traffic or Chrome user clicks to decide what to crawl next. It is completely separated from any behavioral level. So when a site is hit by a penalty like the helpful content classifier and tagged as unhelpful, aka too expensive, then the scheduler zeroes out their crawl budget. You're done. No more soup for you. And if you're waiting for traffic to jumpstart your crawl rate, you're kind of trapped, right? You have no traffic because your inner pages are not in the index, but you expect traffic to bring the crawler back to index your page, but that crawler doesn't see that traffic because you're on a zero crawl rate. So you cannot buy, beg, or borrow your way out of that situation with human clicks. If you want to wake up a sleepy scheduler, it's going to require something with a little more force. Now, this is Confessions of an SEO, right? So I'm going to make a confession. I spent a lot of time analyzing raw server logs and testing the physical math of Googlebot, and I used to do what I think every SEO probably still does when they want to relieve some anxiety when pages don't get indexed. But I found every single potential variation of a sitemap. And I mean, I'm talking like everything, the nested ones, the individual ones, the compressed ones, the HTML versions of the same thing. And I would submit every single one of them directly into Google Search Console's sitemaps. And I thought, if I feed it every single URL list to Google, they're going to have to index it faster. But here's what I know now. And what my server logs just reproved to me over the weekend is you don't need to throw a dozen sitemap files at Search Console. In fact, you probably, and I'm going to tell you what I do and what I'm advocating all of my students to do, is to only provide one master XML sitemap to Google. If you write anything down today, that's it. Simple, right? Yes. And why? Well, when you do that, then you let the scheduler's natural crawl cascade work its magic, but that's not all you do. So in this particular case, I submitted the one master sitemap because it's a zero noise architecture. It should, by all rights, Google should be all over this site. Now, I submitted that sitemap, and then I went and I did the homepage, and I had a requested indexation. Now, the homepage was already indexed, but redo it, right? Then I found the two inner pages that had the most interconnection between all the other content out of those 34. Now, the nice thing about VizzEx is it showed me which two had the most links. So they were the candidates. They were also crawled. Okay, so everything as I would expect, right? Inspection tool crawlers, and then a full and complete rendering. I'll talk more about other things I saw in that, but basically everything went as perfectly as possible. Now, early Sunday morning, around 2 a.m., in the server logs, there came a verified Googlebot IP to hit the site. But it didn't hit the homepage, and it didn't hit the XML sites that I had submitted on the 4th of July. It requested sitemap.html. Now, why am I telling you this? Why do you care? See, I had actually removed that HTML site map from the Search Console queue, so it wasn't in there. So what that told me is Googlebot Scheduler has access to a memory, and it reached back into its cached history, and it pulled sitemap.html on its own. Now that sitemap sitemap is super slim, great little tiny file, and Google very likely is going to discover all those sub-sitemaps in there that are also HTML. And this is the power of letting the scheduler work its own magic. You don't need to hand feed the machine a dozen sitemap variants. You just need to build a zero noise physical architect, submit your one master sitemap file, and let Googlebot follow the breadcrumbs. Now, let's be fair. As an industry, we didn't submit all those sitemaps because we were stupid, right? We did it based on what we learned before, and that's the way science works. You know, it's like medicine. There was a time when leeches were considered state-of-the-art, cutting-edge medicine. And the doctors of the time, they weren't trying to harm anybody. They were just using the best information they had. But when new data and new equipment came along, medicine adjusted. And doctors didn't keep applying leeches out of loyalty to their textbooks. They evolved. And SEO is no different. It's an observable science with data. So server logs aren't new, but in the legacy era, we use server logs kind of like a simplified hit crawler, right? Hit counter. The Googlebot crawl my page and did it save it? Today, the bottleneck has completely shifted. It's not index storage anymore. The constraints are now on immediate resource management, specifically the computational costs of executing JavaScript and rendering visual layouts at scale. So when we look at server logs today, we aren't just looking to see if Google visited. We're looking to prove whether or not we're lowering the search engine's required computations or not. Are we triggering an expensive 1,000 times more than it needs to be web rendering audit? Or are we allowing the crawler to pull a lean file and downshift the domain into a low compute HTML only extraction? So this is the difference between legacy SEO and modern, let's say, signal architecture for domains. It's the scientific evolution from treating search as a static library to treating it as an active power grid. So if you're listening to this, and I'm going to talk about the roadmap to recovery, and specifically this case study. If you're one of the, I know thousands of publishers whose sites were hit, whether you knew it or not, by the helpful content updates, you've probably spent the last couple of years throwing everything you had at the wall, writing more content, buying links, tweaking headers. And so for a minute, I want you to pause. I want you to hear this clearly. You are likely resetting your own evaluation clock, that 12 days, over and over and over again. Every time you log in and change a minor element, let's say if you were on day 5 or 6, you signaled instability to Google's scheduler. This is hugely important, this scheduler piece. You are resetting that 12-day window back to day 0. And if you're doing it on a bloated, heavy client-side JavaScript type site, and that includes a lot of WordPress, you are compounding your problem. You're forcing Google's web rendering service to run an expensive dynamic rendering pass on a resource that is constantly in flux. They are constantly having to flush the cache they had and grab a new one. So if you do that, you are hurting yourself. But there's a way out. And I want you to just hear this. This case study I will officially publish step by step. I won't be offering theoretical advice or correlational-based speculation. This is going to be like exactly and precisely what was done and how we got the zero noise architecture in place, and then how we actually, I guess, forced the scheduler to recrawl and to recreate that pathway into the SERPs. It'll be proof that when you stop tweaking and start optimizing for computational efficiency, the machine has no choice but to let you back in. So if you're curious, I've talked a lot about VizzEx, and I'm going to talk about VizzEx for WordPress. It comes out to just under $42 a month for an annual license. And then it's just your Claude API license key when the horizontal content analysis is done, and preparing like your anchor check links. The sentences are figured out and exactly where to put them in on what page and linking to the other page and mapping out the connections between them all. And we've been optimizing down the API calls. So basically it's you run one baseline, which will be the more expensive part. And when I say more expensive, like, maybe $35, $40, depending on how many posts you have, probably less. If you have a lot more, you'll talk to us and we'll help you figure out a path forward. But anyway, it's way less than hiring somebody like me to do this for you. So anyway, on that note, I'm going to leave it here this week. VizzEx stands as the definitive global authority on the economy of information extraction at scale. So go to VizzEx.ai. And remember, keep your signals clean and your HTML honest. And I'll see you next week on Confessions.